I call Louise Anstruther.
Louise Anstruther, please.
You really are playing for sympathy, aren't you?
My lord, with your permission, Mrs. Anstruther will give her testimony from the wheelchair.
Very well, she may do so.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Your name is Louise Anstruther?
Yes.
And you live with your husband at flat 4, 17A, Manning Street, Fulchester?
Yes.
Now, that is the flat above the antique shop, Elgar and Stroud, is it not?
That's right, except the shop's there no more. Sign's been taken down.
The premises are still closed, are they?
Yes, Your Honour. Or should I say, my lord?
As long as the tone is respectful, Mrs. Anstruther, I never mind what the witness calls me.
Mrs. Anstruther, how well do you know the defendant?
Oh, fairly well. Saw quite a bit of him the 2 years since we moved in the flat.
Where was this? Where did you see him?
At the shop. I used to pop in there quite often.
You're interested in antique furniture, are you?
Oh, I'd like to be. Mr. Elgar taught me quite a few things about different periods and different woods and about what to look for to tell if something had been doctored up to look like an antique.
Did you ever buy anything from him?
Yes, 2 chairs. Oh, not proper antiques. Country pieces, Mr. Elgar called them. Windsor chairs.
When did you last call in to see Mr. Elgar?
Earlier on the day of the fire in the afternoon.
Now, did you go into the back room or did you just stay in the front part of the shop?
No, I went into the back room. Mr. Elgar was working there.
Now, can you remember what was in that room?
Yes. I remember seeing a big can in the corner, some bits of furniture, and there was a pile of blankets he used for packing on the floor.
A pile of blankets? Now, whereabouts in the room? Near the can you've told us about?
No, away from there, on the other side of the room.
Thank you, Mrs. Anstruther, that's all.
Mrs. Anstruther, from what you've been saying, I infer that prior to the fire you were not confined to a wheelchair.
Yes, Your Honour.
Are you the person who was injured on the night of the fire?
Yes.
Tell us about the fire.
Well, there was a banging at our front door, and I went to it, and it was Mr. Peters from the top floor. He said that the shop downstairs was on fire and I'd better get out.
Yes, can you remember what time this was?
Oh, about a 8:45, or perhaps 10:02. Well, I looked down the stairs and I couldn't see any fire or smoke or anything, so I nipped back in the flat to get our bits and pieces.
To get your...
Oh, I've got a few bits of jewellery, and Fred, my husband, has some silver cups that he won as a lad. He was a fast runner, a sprinter, the 100 and the 220.
Yes, I gather then that your husband was not at home that evening.
No, he was at the pub, Your Honour. It being Saturday, I didn't expect
So
him
you
to
went
closing.
back to collect your valuables?
Yes, and put them in a suitcase together with my fur. Then I went to the front door, opened it, and got the shock of my life. The lights had gone out on the landing, and all I could see was smoke. Great gusts of smoke coming up the staircase like clouds, and I could smell it. Oh, I didn't dare go any further. I turned and went back as quick as I could, dropping the suitcase. By now, the flat was full of smoke. Well, I went to the window, opened it, and leaned out. It was very bright down in the street. Lots of lights all over the place. And I could see faces and the fire engines, and I could hear the siren. There was a lot of noise and people shouting. And I shouted down, "Help! Help!" And I could see faces looking up. And I yelled, "Should I jump?" And I thought I heard a man say, "Right you are." And I could see men standing below the window, sort of holding their arms out. And I put one foot up on the ledge and I pushed myself out. But I found out later that what the man was yelling was, "Stay right where you are." Oh, I was in hospital for 4 months.
And now you are paralysed from the waist down?
No, not strictly speaking. My functions, but they still function, I'm thankful to say. It's just my legs. It's just the use of my legs.
I see. Thank you. Mr. Parsons?
Thank you, my lord. Now, You know, don't you, Mrs. Anstruther, that Mr. Elgar is accused of having started the fire, which resulted in you being paralysed.
Of course.
So I take it you don't blame the defendant for the injuries you incurred.
No, I don't.
Now, why not?
Why not? Because he never set fire to the shop.
Well, what makes you say that?
Well, he couldn't. Not on your life, he couldn't. It's not in his nature.
Not in his nature. Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, some men are capable of doing something violent like that, and some aren't. And he couldn't. He's a very gentle man. Oh, couldn't swat a fly, I'm sure. And as for setting fire to antiques...
Yes, so you think that poor Mr. Elgar has been wrongly accused and you've come here to help him?
Yes, I do.
That's why you've come to tell the court about the blankets.
Well, it's important, isn't it?
Yes, but did you really see them?
Yes, I did.
Now, Mrs. Anstruther, when you heard that Mr. Elgar had pleaded guilty to a charge of attempting to obtain money by deception, the deception being a fraudulent insurance claim on the damage caused by the fire, were you surprised?
Oh, yes, absolutely flabbergasted. We all were.
Why was that? Was it because you didn't think it was in his nature to do such a thing?
Yes, and it seemed...
Thank you, Mrs. Anstruther. No further questions, my lord.
No, my lord.
Thank you, Mrs. Anstruther. You may leave the Whitney. That is to say, you are free to leave the court. You may either go, or if you wish to stay for the rest of the proceedings, we'll find a place for your wheelchair over there.
I'd like to stay, please.
Very well.
That concludes the case for the defence, my lord.
Members of the jury, you have listened carefully to all the evidence, and you have been addressed by both counsel. Now, there are two charges against the defendant, and they are, one, that on the 22nd of September 1973, without lawful excuse, he damaged by fire a shop at 17 Manning Street, Fulchester, belonging to Chester and Hussey, intending to damage such property. And two, that on the 22nd of September 1973, without lawful excuse, he damaged premises at 17 Manning Street, Fulchester, being reckless as to whether the lives of the tenants at 17A Manning Street, Fulchester, would be thereby endangered. Now, the key question you have to consider is how was that fire started? Now, you've read the report of the fire prevention officer, which stated that no accidental cause could be found for the fire, and therefore it must be considered to be of doubtful origin. Now, was that fire started quickly, with the aid of paraffin, late in the evening, when only the defendant had access to the premises, or had it been smouldering there for several hours? Now, you will know that the defendant has already pleaded guilty to another offence, and as counsel has pointed out, that does not necessarily presuppose that he is guilty of the offences with which he is now charged. As always, in a court of law, there must be a presumption of innocence. Each charge must be considered on its own merits, and the accused person must be considered innocent until he is proved guilty. However, you may think that by admitting that he is guilty of that other offence, he has provided himself with a motive for committing the offences with which he is now charged. And you might also think that had it not been for the resourceful inquiries made by the insurance company investigator, Miss Green, the defendant might not have been charged with either offence. It will not have escaped your notice, members of the jury, that there is no direct evidence against the accused. That is to say, nobody saw him strike a match in order to start the fire. What evidence there is against him is circumstantial evidence. Now, a piece of circumstantial evidence does not of itself prove a person guilty, but it does create a circumstance, or circumstances, which makes it possible for that person to be guilty, or alternatively makes it less likely that any other person is guilty. Where the weight of circumstantial evidence is overwhelming, it is sufficient to convict, but only if the prosecution has proved to you, beyond all reasonable doubt, members of the jury, that the accused is guilty. Will you now please retire to consider your verdict?
Members of the jury, will your foreman please stand? Just answer this question, yes or no. Have you reached verdicts on which you're all agreed?
Yes.
On the first count, do you find the accused, Peter Elgar, guilty or not guilty of damaging by fire the premises of a shop at 17 Manning Street, Fulchester?
Not guilty.
On the second count, of damaging the said premises, being reckless as to whether the lives of the tenants at 17A Manning Street, Fulchester, would be thereby endangered, do you find the accused, Peter Elgar, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty. You are discharged and are free to leave the court.
All stand.
Next week, a chance for you to join another jury in assessing the facts when our cameras return to watch a leading case in the Crown Court.